It was a cold night. The moon shone in the night sky. It was a half moon. 3 people were traveling in a horse carriage to a distant land. They were tired and hoped to take rest somewhere. Suddenly they saw a great flutter of bats. They were not fruit bats, they were vampire bats. When the bats cleared away, the men saw a huge ancient monument just ahead of them. They were surprised to see this monument in such a secluded place. But knowing their present condition, they thought about taking rest there. But by this time, the horses started neighing. This surprised the 3 men. They asked the carriage driver the reason behind it. The carriage driver was lost in his own thoughts and finally said, "Sirs, I plead to you not to go to that place. There are great dangers over there. These horses are neighing because they have sensed it." But the 3 men had an urgent business at their destination, so they knew they had to take rest in this place and leave the next morning. So, they ignored the carriage driver's advice and left for the monument. They asked the carriage driver if he would like to come with them. The carriage driver said that he wouldn't go with them, but he would wait for them until the next morning. After this, the 3 men left for the monument. When they reached it, they saw a huge, massive door made of pure bronze in front of them. They knew it was useless to knock on it. So, they pushed at the door with all their might and finally opened it. They entered and looked around. It was a marvelous sight. The ceiling of the room was at a very great height. The walls were made of beaten bronze. They also saw sculptures of ancient gargoyles at regular intervals on the walls. There were many candles that hung from the ancient ceiling which illuminated the entire room. Then suddenly, the huge door closed behind them. And they were interrupted by a stern, majestic voice. The men turned their attention from the door to where the voice had come from. They saw a huge figure about 7 feet tall and proportionately well built. He was dressed up in some ancient clothing with a large overcoat over it. He greeted the men saying, "Welcome to my dwelling, young men, and be comfortable. I am Lavros. You could also call me a vampire, because I am a vampire, ha, ha, ha. And believe me, I have been living as a vampire for many centuries. Now, since you have come here and know who I am, I can let you go only on one condition. And that is, that you join me. Now decide for yourselves whether you wish to join me. I am waiting for your answer." The 3 men were terrified, and half understood what the vampire had just told them. In their panic, they rushed towards the door and tried to open it. But Lavros bluntly cut in. "It's of no use. That door won't open unless I command it to." The 3 men turned and stared at the vampire in horror. Then Lavros said, "I assume that the answer to my question from you is a no. In which case I have to use force." The men were so frightened that they tried to run away from the vampire, but soon realized it was in vain. They realized they couldn't move from where they were standing. Then Lavros slowly moved towards them and stared at their eyes. After a few seconds, the 3 men grew calm and quiet, and their eyes closed. Lavros had hypnotized them. Then he went to the first man and opened his mouth. The canines of his upper jaw protruded out, and he made a small wound on the neck of the man. Blood started oozing out from the wound and the vampire lapped it up with his tongue. He did the same with the other 2. After a while the men came around. They looked around and remembered where they were. But now they were not afraid. They felt some pain on their neck and felt it with their hands. Then they looked at their hands and saw blood on it. Then Lavros said to them, "I have sucked some blood from you. Now you are all vampires. From now on, you will sustain yourselves by drinking the blood of humans. Nothing can kill you, unless anything made of silver pierces your body. Also, if you drink someone's blood, they won't change into vampires, like I changed you, because you are not as powerful as I am. Now you can go out into the night and find prey for drinking blood, and during the daytime, you can stay in my abode. I do not have to drink blood to sustain myself, because I have been drinking the blood of people for many centuries and I do not need it anymore." A few moments later, a transformation came upon the 3 men. They grew a foot taller, and their ears grew more pointed and a charm came upon their faces. In the meantime, outside the monument, the horses were neighing ever more violently. The carriage driver grew more and more frightened. Finally, he lost his nerve and hurried away. Meanwhile, inside the monument, after the transformation of the 3 vampires, Lavros told them, it is nearing dawn. Just a few hours left for it. I will show you to your resting places now. Come along with me. Soon he led the newly formed vampires out of the huge hall through a door. Then he took them along an array of corridors and finally reached the end of one corridor. A massive door stood in front of them. The vampire took out a set of gold keys from one of his pockets and chose one from it. Soon he opened the door with the key. Then he led the other 3 vampires into the room. The 3 vampires looked around the room and found it to be quite large. They saw that the walls were made of beaten bronze and there were sculptures of gargoyles on the right and left sides of the room. Straight ahead of them, they saw a large window which was presently shut. Then they looked to the floor and saw 4 boxes. The boxes were made of solid iron. At first, they didn't understand what it was meant for, and they looked inquiringly at Lavros. Lavros understood that the 3 vampires hadn't made any sense of what they had just seen. So, he told them, "This room and these boxes are where you will be resting. You can occupy 1 box each whenever you rest. You must be tired by now. So, you can get into these boxes and rest until tomorrow evening. Then you can go out into the town to find prey." Saying this, Lavros left them and closed the door behind him. The 3 vampires had a final look at the room and the window and then decided to rest in their boxes. They opened the lid of their boxes and got inside. Finally, when they had laid down, they closed the lid above them. Morning came and passed by, and then came evening. At about 8 o'clock, the 3 vampires got out of their boxes. They were very hungry for blood by now. So, they went and opened the window and looked outside. They could see the town at a distance. Then they took the form of a bat and flew away from the window. All 3 of them went in different directions. Their first intention was to explore the town. Meanwhile, in the town, a small celebration was to be held. It was the 25th wedding anniversary of Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. The celebration was to be held in a hall which was just near to a bridge. The town got its name as Bridgetown because of this bridge. Now it so happened that 3 detectives, who belonged to the same detective agency, had also come for this get-together. Now one of the detectives, Mr. Sean, was the brother of Mrs. Roberts. All the invites had begun to assemble in the hall. The 2 detective friends of Mr. Sean, Mr. Valerie and Mr. Fraser, were already present in the hall. Sean right now was in a gift shop looking for the best present for his sister. As he was looking for one, his eyes fell upon a silver knife. The handle of the knife was made of silver and the blade. He liked it so much that he immediately went to the shopkeeper and told him to wrap it up. Soon he was out of the shop. He walked towards the hall. But to reach the hall, he had to cross the bridge. He climbed onto the bridge and started walking. Some of the street lights were not working, due to some reason. So, there wasn't enough light. Sean looked at his watch to know the time, because he knew he was already late. But to his dismay, he found that his watch had stopped working. He cursed himself for this and resumed his walk. As he was walking, he saw a tall man coming from the opposite direction. He thought to himself, I can ask this fellow what time it is. When he reached the tall man, he asked him, "Excuse me, sir, could I know the time on your watch, please?" The tall man replied, "I don't carry a watch with me." Then Sean asked, "And why so?" To this the man replied, "Because I do not need to." "Oh, it doesn't matter," Sean said. Then he continued, "But, by the by, have you been invited to the party at the town hall? It is my sister's 25th wedding anniversary." To this the tall man said bluntly, "I don't go to parties." Sean said, "Oh, well, but I must be on my way now. I am already late for the function. I was delayed because I was in a gift shop buying a present for my sister. It is a silver knife." When the man heard about the silver knife, he was suddenly taken aback and asked Sean, "You mean, you have a silver knife with you?" Sean replied, "Yes, and a very good one too." Now the man grew frightened and said, "I have to go now." Sean could make out that the man was shaken up and asked him, "Why are you so frightened? It is just a silver knife I am having with me." The man replied, "Never mind. I just have to be going." Saying this he left. Sean was a bit disturbed at the strange behavior of this man. But being a detective, he registered this small event in his mind. Then he rushed towards the hall. When he reached the hall, the function had already started. The guests were seated and exchanging pleasantries. There was a stage and Mr. and Mrs. Roberts were seated on chairs, specially made for them. At regular intervals, guests used to go up the stage to give presents to Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. And there were photographers, who used to click photos of theirs. When Sean's turn came, he went up the stage and offered his little present to his sister, and a photographer clicked their photo. Then Sean went back and joined his friends, Mr. Fraser and Mr. Valerie. As the function was going on, Sean recollected the event that had happened at the bridge with the tall man and narrated it to Fraser and Valerie. To this Fraser said, "We can't do anything right now. If it gets serious, we'll come to know later." The function got over within half an hour, and the guests moved to an adjacent hall. It was the banquet hall. A buffet had been prepared for the guests. Soon the guests started indulging in food and wine. The food was rich, and wine flowed freely. This continued for about an hour, after which the guests started to retire home. The three detectives also made their way towards a hotel where they had booked a room for themselves. When they had finally got into their room, they freshened up and were soon at bed. Meanwhile, the tall man whom Sean had encountered at the bridge, who obviously was a vampire, took the form of a bat and soared into the sky. He began to observe all the houses from above. His eyes fell on a double-storied house. He noticed that the window of the top floor was open, and he saw a young woman sleeping on her bed. He at once left for the window. When he reached the window, he got inside and took the form of a man. Then in a low whisper, he called out to the woman, "Come, my dear, come to me." The woman immediately got up from her bed and in a trance went towards the vampire. Then the vampire opened his mouth and the canines of his upper jaw protruded out. He made a small wound on her neck and blood started to ooze out. The vampire then started to lap up the blood with his tongue. After a while, when he had had his fill, he again took the form of a bat and flew out of the window. The woman, due to heavy loss of blood, staggered and fell onto her bed in a contorted fashion. Meanwhile, the second vampire was also flying in the air. As he was flying, he saw a one-story house, and on the first floor, he saw a window open, and a young girl about 20 years old at her study table. The girl was a medical student and was busy preparing for her exams. The vampire silently moved towards the window. When he reached it, he stepped inside. The girl suddenly caught a glimpse of someone moving from the corner of her eye. Then she looked around and saw the vampire. She was terrified. But before she could make any sound, the vampire hypnotized her, and then the girl went towards him. The vampire made a wound on her neck with his protruded canines and lapped up the blood that oozed out from it. When he had had enough, he took the form of a bat and flew away through the window. The young girl, weak from loss of blood, fell to the floor and lay there in the same state until next morning. The study table with its books and the lamp which was still lit stayed as it was until the next morning. Now, the third vampire was also flying in the sky. He was in an area where there was a power failure. As it was late in the night, the town people had put off their candles and were sound asleep. At one place in that area, there was an electricity generator, and a mechanic was working on it to rectify the snag. A few town people were gathered over there with torches in their hands. The torches were put on to enable the mechanic to work. About 60 yards from where they were, there was a house where a newlywed couple were living. The couple had come out of their house to look at what was happening at the electricity generator. Now the vampire saw them. By this time, the vampire was very hungry for blood. So, he silently landed behind them. Then he struck the man on his neck with a heavy blow of his hand. The man fell to the ground with a thud. The woman immediately looked behind and saw her husband lying motionless on the floor. Then she saw the vampire. But before she could do anything, the vampire hypnotized her and then went towards her. He made a small wound on her neck and lapped up the blood that oozed out from it. When he had satisfied himself, he again took the form of a bat and flew away from there. Both the husband and wife lay beside each other in the same condition until the next morning. Morning came and the town was abuzz with the news of the three women. All the three women were admitted in the same hospital. And the man who had been struck down by the third vampire near the electricity generator was also admitted in the same hospital. The doctors examined the three women and found that their weakness was due to heavy loss of blood. But due to their surprise, they couldn't see any visible signs of injury. They could only see 2 small holes on their necks. They were baffled. The first reason was that they knew the blood had come out from the 2 holes, but how? And the next question was, who did it? The 3 women were shifted to the ICU where they were given medical attention. Now the news of these 3 women reached the 3 detectives too. They immediately rushed to the hospital. When they reached the hospital, they showed their identity cards to the doctors to prove that they were private detectives. Then all of them walked towards the ICU. Once they arrived there, the detectives had a look at the patients and then Fraser asked the doctors, "What has happened to these women?" Then one of the doctors said, "We are a bit puzzled. The reason is because there has been severe loss of blood from each of these women, but there are no signs of injury. There are only 2 small holes on their necks. And it is from these 2 holes that the blood could have oozed out." Then Fraser asked the doctors if he, Valerie and Sean could see the 2 small holes on the necks of the 3 women. The doctors said that they could. The 3 detectives went to each woman and saw the 2 holes on their necks. The women were all yet unconscious, so they didn't understand what was going on around them. When the detectives had made their investigations, they left the hospital. Then they made their way to the police station. When they reached the police station, they again flashed their identity cards to them. The 3 detectives listened as the police narrated the information that they had gathered the previous night. After their discourse with the police, the 3 detectives left the police station. Now their hotel was only about half a mile from the police station. So, they decided to walk it out and, in the meantime, discuss their case. Fraser began, "I mean, this is amazing. How can such a loss of blood happen from 2 small wounds?" Valerie responded, "Yes, I too am puzzled. Moreover, how could it have been done? And that too with all 3 women in the same fashion." Suddenly a vague idea struck Sean. He said, "Have you read about vampire stories?" Both Fraser and Valerie looked at each other and then Fraser said, "Yes, but what are you coming to say?" Sean replied, "Couldn't it have been the act of a vampire or rather vampires?" Both Fraser and Valerie were spellbound at first, but then Fraser said, "These are all unfounded ideas. We shouldn't rely on these for our investigations." But then Sean said, "I know, but as the present situation is, we have to keep this option open." Then Valerie said to Fraser, "I think we should agree with him." "Not yet, he had better explain himself first." Fraser said. Sean began, "Well, I'll begin with the encounter I had with the tall man at the bridge last night. When I first asked him the time on his watch, he said that he doesn't carry a watch with him. Then when I asked him whether he had been invited to the party at the town hall, he said that he doesn't go to parties. Finally, when I said that I am carrying a silver knife with me, he got terribly frightened. It is a very peculiar behavior." "Very peculiar behavior indeed," Fraser said. Valerie asked Sean, "So, what do you conclude from this?" Sean replied, "He is a vampire." Both Fraser and Valerie were completely taken aback with disbelief. Fraser said to Sean, "Come on, Sean. You just can't keep telling things you like. These are serious issues." But Sean said, "No. I am sure of this. I can prove it." Fraser asked, "How?" Sean began, "Before we come to that, we have to make some preparations." "Like what?" Fraser asked. Sean continued, "As we all know, that tall man or the vampire was afraid of the silver knife that I was carrying. It means that he is afraid of silver articles or weapons. Now we already have our revolvers with us. So now if we could just go to the silversmith in the town and make some silver bullets, we could load it into our revolvers and get ready for any eventuality." Fraser said, "This is all utter nonsense to me, but since Valerie is also agreeing, I am for it." Then they immediately left for the town silversmith. When they reached there, they gave the measurements for their bullets and asked him when they could get their bullets ready. The silversmith said that they could collect it within 3 hours. The 3 detectives then made their way to their hotel. When they were back in their room, they had their lunch and rested for some time. After about 2.5 hours, they got up and again went to the silversmith. The silversmith had the bullets ready for them. The detectives took out their revolvers and loaded the bullets into it and understood that the bullets perfectly fitted their revolvers. They paid the silversmith and again returned to their hotel room. Then Fraser asked Sean, "Now what?" Sean replied, "Before I tell you my plan, we should know certain facts we got from the police earlier this day." Fraser said, "All right, so what is it?" Sean again continued, "You see, according to the reports we got from the police today, the first woman was attacked at around 2:15 a.m. and the second around 2:45 a.m. and the third around 3 a.m. Now let's look at the intricacies of these attacks. If this vampire had attacked the First Lady, then he would have drunk his fill, because we know that the woman suffered from heavy loss of blood. Which means that it is highly improbable that he would have attacked the Second Lady, because he has had his fill. Which means that the Second Lady was attacked by another vampire. And he too would have had his fill. So, he too wouldn't have attacked the Third Lady. So, it means that the Third Lady was attacked by another vampire. So now, according to me, in total, there are 3 vampires. Also, since all the 3 incidents have occurred in the same night, my assumption is that the 3 vampires are allies. Now let's look at how these crimes were committed. First, let's take the example of the First Lady. She was sleeping in her room on the 2nd floor of her house, with the door of her room locked from the inside. So, her parents and the police had to break open the door in the morning to get inside. And, in the night, the gate of the house was guarded by a watchman. Now the only point of entry into her room was through the open window. Now, as the legend goes, vampires can take the form of large bats. So, my only explanation is that this vampire took the form of a large bat, flew in through the window and somehow sucked blood from the woman. And then after he had had his fill, he again flew out of the window. Now the case of the Second Lady. She was busy studying for her exams in her room. Again, her room was also locked from the inside and the gate of her house was guarded by a watchman. And the only source of entry into her room was through the open window. So, this second vampire also flew in through the window and somehow sucked blood from her and flew away through the window again. Now the case of the third woman is slightly different. She was seen lying unconscious alongside her husband in the morning in front of their house. Her husband also had a heavy swelling on his neck. Which according to me, means that the third vampire landed behind them in the night, struck the man on his neck, and before the woman could do anything, he overpowered her and drank blood from her. After which he flew away from there. Now, according to me, these were how the crimes were committed. Now let's come to my plan. My plan is basically a trap to either kill or eliminate these vampires. For that I need 2 things. First, I need a house, possibly a 1-story one, or a 2-story one, which should be unoccupied right now. Second, I want a young girl, to be used as a bait to lure the vampire or vampires. Other than these 2, I need one more thing which we already have. And that is our walkie-talkies. Now I have already figured out the girl. She is my sister, Mrs. Roberts' daughter Rosie. Now we must get into action soon. So, you 2 be on your way to an estate agent and get a house for rental for a couple of days. And in the meantime, let me go to my sister and arrange for Rosie. After our work is done, we will all meet at our hotel room in the evening. I will tell you the remainder of my plan later. When all of them understood their roles, they parted ways. Sean went his own way, while Fraser and Valerie went their own way. After walking for about 5 minutes, Fraser and Valerie neared a grocery store. They got inside and at once asked the owner if he could direct them to an estate agent. The owner of the grocery shop understood that they were in a hurry and immediately told them, "Go right through this lane and turn left. There you will see many buildings. Now the third building is a commercial complex. There on the ground floor is the office of an estate agent. But you must hurry. His office is about to close." Both Fraser and Valerie thanked the shopkeeper and rushed out of the store. They walked by the lane through which they had come and soon took the left turn. They could see many buildings over there. Then they saw the third building to their right. It was a reasonably good-looking shopping plaza. They crossed the road and neared the plaza. Just ahead of them on the ground floor of the complex, above an office, was a board that read, Jerry's Estate Agency. Both Fraser and Valerie came to know that they had come to the right place. They went towards the door and pushed it open. When they entered inside, they saw a man in his late 40s, relaxing on his chair. And to his right, they saw another man standing whom Fraser and Valerie thought to be his assistant. As soon as they entered inside, the man seated leaned forward and asked them to sit. Both Fraser and Valerie got seated on chairs, and then the man introduced himself. "I'm Jerry. How may I help you?" Both Fraser and Valerie immediately showed their identity cards to him and told him that they were private detectives. Then Fraser said to him, "We are looking for a house on rental for 3 days and 3 nights, possibly a 2-stored one or a 1-story one. We need it for an urgent task." The man thought about it for a while and then concluded, "There is a double-story house just a mile from here. Its occupants had vacated just a few days back. When would you like to occupy it?" Valerie replied, "Preferably tonight." Then the man asked, "But what about the paperwork?" To this Valerie said, "Since we are on official duty, we can do it later." Then Jerry said, "All right, sir, you can occupy it tonight itself, and it will be £20. Valerie paid the amount, and then Fraser asked him a favor. "Could you drop us to the house, please?" To which Jerry said, "My assistant, James, would be glad to do so." He gave his instructions to James, and soon all the 3 of them were on their way to the double-story house. On the way, James asked them a question: "Why is it so urgent for you to occupy the house tonight itself?" Valerie responded sharply, "It's classified." James replied, "Oh, I see." They go to the house. They got out of the car and walked towards the gate. The street lights were burning brightly, so James had no difficulty in opening the lock of the gate. He opened the gate and then they went towards the main door of the house. Using one of his keys, James opened the main door and all of them entered inside. After which he switched on all the lights in all the rooms on that floor. Fraser and Valerie examined all the rooms and then they all went upstairs to the first floor. The lights were all put on by James, and Fraser and Valerie examined all the rooms in that floor too. After which they finally went to the second floor. The lights were again put on, and both Fraser and Valerie set out to examine all the rooms on this floor. There were 3 rooms in total. And all were bedrooms. Fraser and Valerie noticed that the 3rd bedroom had a window facing the bed. And, to the right of the window, there was a small balcony, which was presently lit by a small bulb. After examining the rooms, James handed over the keys of all the rooms, the main door and the gate to Valerie. Then Fraser asked another favor from James. "It's getting late. Could you please drop us at our hotel? We'll be occupying this house only in an hour or 2. To which James replied, "I'd be happy to." Soon James switched off all the lights in the rooms and they came downstairs to the first floor. He did the same over there and then they came to the ground floor. He did the same there too, and finally they got out of the main door. Valerie locked the main door and then all of them got outside the gate and Valerie locked the gate. Then they got inside the car and sped towards the hotel. Within a matter of 15 minutes, they reached the hotel. Both Fraser and Valerie got out of the car and thanked James very much. On his part, James wished them the best of luck and sped away. Fraser and Valerie got into their room and relaxed. Fraser told Valerie, "I don't know what Sean has in store for us." Valerie replied, "Me too." In the meanwhile, Sean was busy arguing his case with his sister over Rosie. With lots of persuasion, Mrs. Roberts finally agreed to send Rosie over with Sean, and that too with much reluctance. She arranged her car and driver to take them to the hotel. As they were leaving, Mrs. Roberts kissed her daughter and bid her farewell. Soon the car was on its way to the hotel. Without much delay, they reached the hotel. When they reached there, Sean immediately asked Fraser and Valerie whether they had got the house for rental. Fraser said, "Yes, we have. It is a double-stored one." Sean said, "Good. Now let's hurry up. We must go there as soon as possible. Also, Valerie, get the walkie-talkies with you." Within a matter of 5 minutes, they were all in the car. The car drove away towards the house, with Valerie giving directions to the driver. It took another 10 minutes to reach there. When they reached there, they got out and Valerie opened the gate and finally went to the main door and opened that too. They all entered inside the house and Valerie went and switched on all the lights. Then Fraser gave the descriptions of all the rooms on all the floors to Sean. Sean said, "All right, let's go to the top floor." They all climbed upstairs to the second floor and Valerie opened the door. They entered inside and Sean inspected the entire floor. He saw the 3 bedrooms and finally when he was studying the 3rd bedroom, he found that the bed was facing the window and there was a small balcony to the right of the window. He at once exclaimed, "Perfect! This is just what I expected." Then he said, "Now, coming to my plan. In my plan, we must set a trap to eliminate this vampire. For that we will make Rosie lie down on this bed reading a book. And at the same time, we also keep this window open. And you, Fraser, will remain hidden behind some bushes about 30 yards from the house. In the meanwhile, myself and Valerie will be crouching ourselves in this balcony waiting for the vampire to come. That is if he comes. Now one of the walkie-talkies will be with Fraser while the other one will be with me. And then we all wait for the vampire to strike. At the slightest movement of the vampire, either in a human form or in the form of a bat, Fraser will warn me." Then he turned to the driver and told him to park the car somewhere out of the vicinity of the house. Then he told everyone, "All right, now we all know what to do. So, let's go." Fraser took one of the walkie-talkies from Valerie and hurried downstairs. In the meantime, Sean took the other one from Valerie. The driver also climbed downstairs and soon both himself and Fraser were outside the house. Fraser hurried across the road and when he was at a suitable distance away from the house, he hid behind some bushes and shrubs, waiting for the vampire to come. The driver drove the car away from the house and when he reached a good distance away from it, he waited over there in it. Inside the house, on the top floor, Sean gently went over to Rosie and told her to lie down on the bed. There was a bookshelf in one corner of the room. Sean went over there and randomly picked up a book. He went to Rosie and told her to pretend to read it. Rosie took the book and looked at the cover page. It was a book on physics. Now Rosie hated physics in college. But she had no option, so she opened the book and kept her eyes on it. Then Sean went and opened the window. After that Sean and Valerie took up their positions in the balcony. Then Sean switched on his walkie-talkie and called out to Fraser, "Fraser, are you all set? Over." Fraser replied, "Yes, I am. Over." Then Sean said, "All right. Keep a lookout for him. Over and out." Then all of them waited intently for the vampire to arrive. They waited for an entire 1 hour, but there was no sign of him. But they didn't lose hope. They again took up their positions and waited for him. Another half an hour passed by. But there was still no sign of him. Now all of them started getting doubts, whether the vampire would strike the same night or some other night. As they were thinking about all these things, the moon emerged from the clouds, and in the bright moonlight, Fraser saw a large bat flapping its wings and moving towards the window. He was very much sure that it was the vampire, because it was heading for the window. In his excitement, he immediately switched on his walkie-talkie and called out to Sean, "Sean, he's coming. Over." Sean asked him back, "Who? What? Over?" Fraser replied, "It's the vampire. He's flying towards the window. Over." Sean replied, "All right. We are ready for him. Over and out." Then Sean told Valerie, "Position your revolver and get ready. When I give the signal, fire away at him." Valerie immediately positioned his revolver and got ready. After a moment, the bat entered the room through the window. He moved in so quietly that Rosie didn't even notice him. After which he took the form of a human being. Then he called out to Rosie, "Come my dear, come to me." Rosie immediately got up from the bed and in a trance went up to the vampire. When she was close enough, the vampire opened his mouth and the canines of his upper jaw protruded out and he was about to pierce Rosie's neck when suddenly Sean shouted, "Fire!" At the same instant, Valerie fired 2 bullets at the vampire. Both hit the vampire in the belly. And the next moment, the vampire turned into a heap of dust. Both Sean and Valerie immediately entered the room from the balcony and looked at the heap of dust. Then Sean looked at Rosie. The young girl was visibly shaken up, but finally she managed to give a smile. Then Sean switched on his walkie-talkie and called out to Fraser, "Fraser, the job is done. Come quickly upstairs and bring the driver also along with you. Over and out." Within a few minutes, both Fraser and the driver also arrived on the scene. Fraser looked at the heap of dust and asked Sean, "Is it him?" "Yes, it is." Fraser said, "Thank goodness. It's all over." Sean replied, "No, it's not. There are 2 more still out there." Fraser said, "Oh, I see." Then Sean said, "We have to report this matter to the police. So, we must get started right away. Come on, let's go." All of them clambered down the stairs and were finally out of the house. They got into the car and were soon on their way to the police station. When they reached there, Sean told the driver to take Rosie back home. After which the 3 of them, Fraser, Sean, and Valerie, went to meet the police. When they met the police, they narrated all that had happened in the past few hours. The police were stunned. Then one of the policemen said, "Since you have said all these things, well, we have some other news for you." Fraser asked, "And what would be that?" The policeman said, "Just half an hour ago, some of our men were patrolling the dead end of the road by which you just came and arrested 2 tall men as suspects in the case related to the 3 women who had been admitted to the hospital yesterday morning. But to our surprise, just after we had handcuffed them, they immediately took the form of large bats and flew away from there." Then Sean asked the police officer, "And which way did they go?" "Towards the dead end of the road by which you had come." Sean did some quick mental calculations and finally told the police officer, "We need a police van to take us to the place where we can deal with these vampires. In the meantime, you can do your investigations at the bungalow. We will assist you in your further investigations once we come back." The police officer arranged for a police vehicle and asked Sean whether he should send some of his men along with him. Sean replied that it would not be necessary and added that he and his 2 friends would be enough for the job. Then all the 3 detectives got into the van and Valerie drove the vehicle towards the dead end of the road. When they reached there, Sean told Valerie to hide the van behind some trees. Then they all got out and inspected the entire area. As they were examining the area, they saw a huge ancient monument just further away from the dead end of the road. They were puzzled at seeing this monument in this remote area. Then Valerie asked Sean, "What now?" Sean replied, "Now we hide behind these bushes and wait for the vampires. Keep your revolvers ready." Time was ticking by, and they waited and waited. 15 minutes went by and then another 15 minutes went by. Still there was no sign of them. Then as they were looking around, they saw a furry, beautiful Labrador on the road, just at some distance away from them. They were looking at it, when suddenly it began to bark violently. At the same instant, Fraser looked towards the sky and saw 2 large bats flapping its wings and flying side by side. He immediately told Sean and Valerie to look up. As soon as Sean and Valerie looked up and saw them, all 3 of them took aim at the vampires and fired at them. Their bullets hit one of the vampires and he turned into dust, which sprinkled down to the ground. At the very same time, the other bat quickly changed its course of flight and flew towards the mansion. When it reached there, he flew in through one of the windows and disappeared. But Fraser, Sean, and Valerie were not to give up so easily. They began to make plans as to what to do next. But as they were looking at the mansion, to their utter surprise, it vanished. "What do we do now?" Fraser asked Sean. As they were thinking about what to do, Valerie came up with an idea. "I have an idea," he said. "Why not fire a few bullets at this mansion and then see what happens?" Both Fraser and Sean liked the idea. Then they walked a little more towards the mansion to get range for their revolvers. When they were sure that they would hit the target, they took aim and fired randomly at the place. After firing a few rounds, they stopped and waited to see what would happen. A few seconds passed by, and then suddenly, the mansion reappeared. But now it was shuddering violently. It looked as though it was going to fall apart any moment. Sean cried out, "Let's go inside and get him or he will escape." All of them broke out into a hasty run towards the mansion. When they reached it, they opened the door with all their might. Then they entered inside. But there was no one there. They could only see pebbles and stones falling from the ceiling. After a minute or two, suddenly, 2 large bats materialized from nowhere. One was large and the other much larger. Instinctively Fraser, Sean, and Valerie took out their revolvers and started firing at them randomly. The first to get hit was the smaller bat, and he turned into dust. At the same time the larger bat lunged towards Fraser to get a hold on him. But Fraser was too quick for him and he fired 3 bullets at him. The vampire soon crumbled into dust. By this time, massive cracks started appearing on the walls of the room. Also, by now, bigger stones and rocks were falling from the ceiling. Looking at all this, Sean yelled out, "This place is going to fall down any time. Let's get the hell out of here." All 3 of them turned around and ran away through the door. They ran quite a distance away from the mansion and then sat down and looked back panting and trembling all over. The monument was shuddering violently and was breaking down in many areas. And finally, within a matter of 5 minutes, it collapsed totally and was turned into a huge pile of dust. All the 3 of them, Fraser, Sean, and Valerie, got up and made their way to the van. They got in and drove away to the police station. Then they assisted the police in their investigations at the bungalow, and then they came back to the site of the monument and assisted them in their investigations there too. After which the police dropped them at their hotel. The 3 of them then freshened up, had their dinner and were soon sound asleep. Morning came and the 3 detectives had breakfast and finally went to Jerry's office and completed the paperwork. Now they had just one job to finish. And that was to meet the press people. They went to the police station and along with the police addressed the press and took questions. They returned to their hotel room. They had lunch and rested for some time. Then they hired a taxi and were soon on their way to their own city.